Hi, and welcome to this week's Mortgage Broker broadcast. This week's podcast is about protection sales and more specifically about how you can get paid or how you get paid as a self-employed mortgage broker on your protection sales and the choices that you have. Indemnity, non-indemnity, or a mixture of both when it comes to getting paid on your protection cases. So do you know what that means? Do you understand what I'm talking about with regards to indemnity, non-indemnity? Do you know what options that you have? What are the benefits of each option? What are the issues with each one? And which one would I go for if I was a self-employed mortgage broker? That's what I want to talk about on this week's podcast. So let's get into the podcast. You're listening to the Mortgage Broker broadcast with me, Craig Skelton, the podcast which helps mortgage brokers at all stages of their mortgage broking career. Hi, and welcome to this week's Mortgage Broker broadcast. As I said, this week's podcast is about protection sales, but more specifically about how you get paid or how you can get paid and the choices you have as a self-employed mortgage broker on the protection cases that you sign up with providers. So that's what this week's podcast is about. And it's looking at the choices that you have in terms of indemnity, non-indemnity, or a mixture of both. And that's what I wanted to get into the podcast because as a mortgage broker, as a self-employed mortgage broker, a key part of your process is protection sales. A key part of your income is protection sales. And a key part of the service that you're providing your clients is protection. So having the right process when it comes to protection is not only important for you and for your business, it's also important for your clients as well. So don't ever underestimate that when it comes to the service that you're providing your clients, because I hear some mortgage brokers who say that they don't talk about protection or don't have it as part of their sales process because they're scared of clawbacks. And if you don't understand what clawbacks are, what clawbacks is, if that is actually a statement, then I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a bit further into the podcast. But for me to hear that, just think about that for a second, that I'm leaving my clients at risk because I fear my commission could be clawed back on the odd client that cancels their protection policy. So just think about that for a second. Is that right from a client service point of view that you're leaving your clients at risk, all your clients at risk, because you're scared of clawback? And I don't believe that's right. And I don't think from a client point of view, you need to understand what your risks are. So if you're not talking about protection as part of your process because you're scared of clawbacks, then that is not right. That's not the right service you're providing your clients. So the good news is that as a self-employed mortgage broker or a self-employed protection only advisor, you do have choices on how you get paid on your protection cases, which can stop clawbacks. You don't have to have every single policy, every single plan on indemnity, which I'll come on to shortly, but you don't need to have the risk of clawbacks. So if that is something that's stopping you from talking to clients about protection, that needs to change. For me, that needs to change. You need to change your process. You need to change your mindset. You need to start talking about protection and the risks that are involved from a client's point of view. So if you are not talking about protection because you're scared of clawbacks, for me, you need to do something about that. So as I said, the good news from as a self-employed mortgage broker or self-employed protection advisor, you do have choices on how you get paid on your protection cases. Is it indemnity or is it non-indemnity? Or put simply, do you want to get paid all the commission, all your commission up front when that policy goes on risk? Or do you want to get it on a monthly income or accrual? So they're your choices that you do have. Indemnity, all up front, paid on risk, or do you have it on accrual, non-indemnity, which means you get drip fed the commission over the period of time of the policy. So the good news is, as a self-employed mortgage broker, that you have those choices. The other good news is that you can mix those up. And the other good news is as well is that you don't have to stick with what you've started out. So if you're just doing it on indemnity right now, you can change that whenever you want. You can change to going on to non-indemnity or accrual. So for me, there are three choices when it comes to getting penalty protection. You've got everything on indemnity, you've got every single policy on accrual, or the last choice, the third option, is having a mixture of both and choosing by the client or by the amount. So let's look at each option and just explain a little bit more detail about some terminology that I've come up with and some jargon so far. So, first of all, the first choice is all on indemnity. Everything's up front. So all your commission that gets paid by the provider into your firm, into the network, however that gets paid, all up front, you get paid that commission on it. Generally, that's on a 2-year or 4-year indemnity. So just to explain what that means is that if it's on a 2-year indemnity, that means if that client cancels in the first 2 years, you will have a clawback, which I'll come on to in a second. If they cancel, so that's on a 2-year indemnity. If you're on a 4-year indemnity, then again, if the client cancels within the 4 years of the policy, then you are liable for a clawback, which means that because you've taken a risk over a longer period with regards to clawback, 4-year indemnity, the commission will be higher than it will be on a 2-year indemnity. Hopefully that makes sense and that you understand that. Now, if you've come from a employed mortgage broker, most employed mortgage brokers working in large corporates, it's always done on indemnity. There's not a choice to do it accrual. There's no choice to do it on split or anything like that. It's very, very clear. So being aware that you do have these choices when you come from a corporate background, an employed background, going into self-employed, knowing that you have got a choice that you can do it on non-indemnity, can do it on accrual, can make a big difference to your mindset and the way that you run your business. So the the good thing about having it all on indemnity is that it gets paid quickly. You've got the quick wins, you get the commission in straight away, especially when you're starting out as a self-employed mortgage broker for the first time. And as I've talked about before on various podcasts, one of the ways to get quick wins is get protection sales in very quickly, get those on risk and get the commission. So that's a good thing. It will help with your cash flow when you're first starting out as a self-employed mortgage broker. So they're the good things about getting everything on indemnity. The negative side of that is clawbacks. And so just to explain what a clawback is that whether you're doing a 2-year indemnity, 4-year indemnity, you're getting a commission all up front. If the client cancels that policy within that 2 years or 4 years, whichever ones you've chosen, then you will be liable for a clawback. So part of that commission, some of that commission, or all of that commission, depending on when the client cancels the policy, will be clawed back, which doesn't help with budgeting, doesn't help with your income as a self-employed mortgage broker, doesn't help with the fluctuation with regards to you getting paid on your cases and what income you're receiving to pay your bills and your outgoings. That doesn't help with that when you're having clawbacks. So just be mindful of that. That is one of the negatives with regards to putting everything on indemnity is the clawback. And as I said on the introduction, that's clawbacks is a big issue for a lot of mortgage brokers because they can be scared of it. For me, if I was putting everything on indemnity and getting paid up front on the commission, you shouldn't be scared of clawbacks because that policy, that plan that you put in place for the client should be there to stay for a long time. It should be built around them. It should be built around their needs, their priorities, their budgets. So there shouldn't really be any risk of clawback. But if you're selling it right and talking about getting it right in the process in the first place. However, those are things to be mindful when you're looking at getting everything on indemnity and upfront. Second choice is getting everything on accrual. And these brokers I know get everything on indemnity. These brokers I know that get everything on accrual. So that basically what that means is that you don't get paid anything up front. Once that policy gets on risk, you receive a monthly income, which roughly speaking is, if it's a 4-year indemnity and say the commission was £1,000, they divide that £1,000 commission by 48 and pay that on a monthly basis. So that's a rough rule of thumb. I won't go by that as actual gospel, but that just gives you a rough idea on how that generally works. So that's how what it means by non-indemnity. What it means by on accrual is that you get paid monthly the commission that you receive from that protection sale. Now, the good thing for me about doing everything on accrual is that you are building a long-term mortgage broker business, as I've said before. So getting everything on accrual, you're building a sustainable business as well, because you're building it on solid foundations. There's no risk of clawback. There's no risk of any liabilities from that point of view of losing £1,000 clawback, 2 grand, 5 grand clawback this month to then jeopardizes your income. You're building a long-term business. You're building a sustainable business because everything is on accrual. Yes, it takes longer, absolutely, which that is an issue which I'll come on to a second. However, the good thing is you're building it on solid foundations. The other part of it as well, the other good thing is that it's a guaranteed monthly income. So when you know that whatever happens, if you are not able to get out of bed or do any business for that month, you know that that income is going to come into your business, whatever happens. So that does give you some sort of stability from a business point of view in knowing that income is going to come in. And it just takes a little bit longer, absolutely. But the good thing is there is no clawbacks with that at all. So when you're on accrual, there's no risk of clawbacks. The issue that I said, that you are waiting a little bit longer to get your commission, it's not as instant as getting it all up front when you put on risk and doing it on indemnity rather than non. However, like I say, for me, you are building a more sustainable business if you're getting things on accrual. One of the couple of brokers that I know, they have got everything on accrual, that they do everything. They've been building their business up for a long period of time, and they use that to pay for admin support. They use that to pay for their marketing campaigns. One of them I know is using them to pay for their office. So they've got an office, high street location, and their accrued protection sales pay for their rent. So that's another way to think about it as well, is that getting your rent and cost covered from your protection side of things as well, because they have that mindset that their income is from the prop fees, the broke fees that they charge, and the protection side of things is a benefit to the side of it, is extra income on top, along with the other third party referrals that they work with. But just so that they don't see that as that core business, they say it's an important part of service for the client. They don't see it as core, which then means they just use that income to then look at spending that wisely in other ways, just to making sure that they've got an office, they've got admin support, and they've got marketing campaigns going on. So that's the second choice. You get in everything on accrual. The third choice, which people tend not to look at, is you can do a mixture of both. So you can look at doing part of your business on indemnity and part of your business on non-indemnity as well. You, as a self-employed mortgage broker, you can tailor it to every single client, every single plan you put in place. You can decide whether you want it on indemnity or non-indemnity, or whichever way you want to choose it. So again, with regards to stability, you've got getting a better balance in there with regards to tailoring it to each client. So if you are talking about protection, you're a little bit worried about clawback with that particular client, then that's fine. Put it on accrual, and then you're not at risk of clawback with that particular client. I know brokers that will set a budget amount. So, for example, if a plan is up to £50 per month from a spend per client, budget per client, they will put, if it's below that, they'll get it on indemnity. So they'll get paid for it up front. They're okay if that does clawback, then they're okay paying out the clawback, because it's not as much as having obviously £100, £200 plan in place with a clawback. So they'll set a budget amount of £50 a month, for example. Anything below that, they get on indemnity. Everything above that is on accrual, so they pay monthly. So the good thing about doing a mixture is that you've got the flexibility to tailor it to each client and tailor it to your business needs, because you can start out with getting everything on indemnity and putting the larger cases onto accrual, and getting that balance right from that point of view. So like I say, the good thing with having a mixture, it gives you that flexibility and tailored to each client. The issue is with doing a mixture is that you're still liable for clawbacks. If you do it on the budget, as an example, then obviously the clawbacks are not going to be as great as something if you did everything on indemnity. So you're still liable for the clawback, and you're not going to be getting paid as much on a monthly basis. So that's just a thing to think about when you've got a mixture as well. So just to recap, the three choices you have from my point of view when it comes to getting paid on your protection commission is the first choice is getting everything on indemnity, getting paid everything up front. The second choice is getting everything on accrual, so it's paid monthly on the drip feed, or then the last choice is getting a mixture of both. They're the sort of three things. So for me, my choice, if I was a mortgage broker building a long-term career, I'd be putting everything onto accrual. I've got no clawbacks, no risk. I'm doing the right thing for the client. I'm not concerned about missing anything from a client service point of view because I'm scared of clawbacks. So, and like I say, I'm building a long-term mortgage broker business. It's good for my budgeting. It's good from my income point of view as a business and my personal income when you're getting everything in accrual, because you know exactly, it gives you some stability in an unstable world of being a self-employed mortgage broker. And like I say, it also helps as well with regards to paying for admin, marketing, offices, or anything like that. So yeah, so that's this week's podcast, looking at indemnity, non-indemnity, mixture of both, and the benefits and the issues of looking at either one of those options. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Next week's guest, we are back to a guest next week. So next week's guest is Dave Corbett, Head of Protection at Mortgage First. So I'm looking to get that podcast out into the world and released next week. If there are any thoughts, feedback, or comments on the podcast, please put them in the chat, whichever platform you're watching this podcast on or listening to the podcast on. If you are a self-employed mortgage broker or looking to set up your own mortgage broker brand and business, or you're looking to accelerate your mortgage broker career, then get in touch and we can discuss how I can help you and support you to achieve your goals. And the last point, and always the last point, is don't forget to run your own race. Thank you for listening to the Mortgage Broker Broadcast, the podcast which helps mortgage brokers at all stages of their mortgage broking career. If you have any questions about this podcast or any topics you want us to discuss, or if you're interested in working with me further, then please get in touch.